Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Elise, and with me is Magic Ace and Redna. We are interviewing Eric Musco and Matt. Say your title. You get your chance, a new one, to say who you are and what you are, or who you want to be.
Okay.
Do you want to magnify your title?
I'm Matt Putzevich. I am the senior operations designer here. Basically, head that up. My job is to imagine creative ways to murder players in ways that will delight them.
That was great.
That was much better. I approve of that message.
Okay, so now, did we want to ask why are you renaming, or can we just summarize on the council of what the answer was?
Yes, we can.
I think we should just summarize. We can.
The question that I asked that we somehow forgot to record was, why on earth did it change from hard mode and nightmare mode to veteran and master mode?
And the really short answer, if you guys can summarize the long one.
Because it seemed like a good idea at the time.
We were trying to create consistency of difficulty naming across all content in the game, which didn't exist at the time.
And would you be able to turn it back in this near term?
No, we could, but it's a lot of work to do so. It's probably not something that would happen outside of an expansion. Doesn't mean it would happen in an expansion, but it's definitely something we talk about, consider changing in the future.
It's a lot more work than you think it is.
Okay, so in March, when the next expansion comes out, you're not going to be changing it back?
No plans at this time.
Well, do we
no, I'm not actually going to try and trap you to a date or anything like that.
Right, exactly. That was smooth.
That's
I didn't get that.
Dangerous.
I don't think Matt even caught what you said, and he agreed to it.
This is why I have a Musco here with me.
I know. I love the just smug little. I am not answering that smile on Musco's face.
Yes, I know. That was funny. Okay, who's next? Matt, if you wanted to do a summary again, you started to say.
Yeah, we were curious about how you got into the industry.
Where you are. Yeah. So go ahead and re-summarize.
Okay. So I have a bachelor's in computer science from Carnegie Mellon. From there, a friend that I made online, I was a guild master of someone who wound up getting a job at Mythic Entertainment.
And Mythic was
Dark Age of Camelot, Warhammer Online.
Correct.
In Fairfax, Virginia.
Right. And Mythic got bought, absorbed, right?
Yeah, they were acquired by EA.
Thank you. That's what I thought. Okay, yeah. Cool.
And so I was working there for about 2.5 years until one day, one of the leads sort of stopped by my desk and he literally asked me, he's like, hey, what do you think about Star Wars? I mean, what do you think about BioWare? And I told him I like these things. And so then the next day they had an interview because they were transferring some heads down to help with the game, and I impressed them just enough to get picked. And so then on August 31st, 2009, I transferred down to BioWare here, where I have been ever since. I started working on the core game, World Quest, Class Quest, things like that, like the just world building. There are a lot of class quests over the years that I wound up touching. Hutta has a special place in my heart. That planet was made and remade so many times because it was one of the first things made. So there was one of the most iterated planets between Korriban and Hutta. I don't think there was a more iterated planet in our game. And then around 1.4, 1.5, the lead of the operations team at the time. They were looking to pull a couple more people into the team, and I was one of the names that came up because I guess they had liked what I did. And so then I first started participating in the operations team for Assation. They had already built the bosses by that point, and so I was helping with just doing the internal play tests with the team and things like that, playing through the bosses and giving feedback and stuff like that. And then after that, for Darvanis and the Gree event, I started making encounters all my own. I was a grown-up developer.
Did you bring tissues? This is going to be heartfelt.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Now we can get into the nitty-gritty. No, I'm just kidding.
That's awesome. And you said earlier that you did Brontos. You did the Brontos encounter.
Brontos is my fault. A few things are my fault. I did Xenoanalyst.
I don't think fault.
I like that
Between
fight.
Gravok and Surgok, which are the other two Gree bosses, I did one of them and then trained another designer with the other one. So we did like it halvesies. I've done Brontos. I did the Operations Chief, the Darvanus Infiltration event in SNV. I also did all the trash in SNV. So all of that is my fault. The Underworld Arms Trader and the Pirate Stim Fiend, most over-designed trash mob ever.
I have to give you a
I
thumbs
don't
down
know.
for this too.
I've let lots of people die on that on purpose, so I don't know. I think it was good.
I love SNV. It's my second favorite operation in the game, but boo on
I
those
recently got Dragon Slayer, so it's now my favorite.
All right, going upside.
In the 3.0 time frame, I did Sparky the Junkyard Dog, the Revanite Commanders, Revan, Brontos, which we already, and Blastmaster.
Oh
Now
my
that
god.
That one, though.
Oh my god, that's you. Okay, I'm done.
Doesn't it all make so much more sense now?
I've rezzed Elise on that boss so many times.
Just
Sorry.
don't stand in the circles. It's easy.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
Don't get shot off the roof. Don't get shot into the bug zapper, and don't stand next to other people when you're not supposed to.
Oh my god. Okay.
No big deal. You know,
Whatever.
Don't let Matt talk down to you. Don't let him.
Okay, so you didn't mention Torque or Underlurker, so I don't hate you.
Correct.
Work is fun, and
I love
Underlurker's
the
fun. The thing
story
is, the
frame
bugs
and
were
the
just
narrative.
so persistent on that one, and then Torque was just such a crowd cluster that, yeah.
I don't know. I like the really challenging ones because as a healer, I get extremely bored. I get so bored, and I start DPSing, and then people die because I'm bored and forget to heal them because I'm so busy DPSing.
Oh,
So I like
That's-
the ones where I have to do stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Torque kind of started as a question of how small of a boss room can we make?
Okay,
And
so
get
that
away
really,
with it.
because that definitely feels that way. Yeah, no question.
Not a fan.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next? I want to try to keep us moving. Who's next?
Sakari, let's put one of Sakari's questions in.
Okay, sounds good. Somebody read it.
Yeah. No one said Sakari was allowed to ask questions. I don't remember approving that.
Well,
I'm
gonna
make-
They were in the
Yeah.
list of questions you received, so.
I didn't say that he had to ask a question, but he did put them in. So out of courtesy, we can ask.
So walk us through the development cycle of an operation from concept to deployment. Do you come up with a theme first? Where do you get ideas for new mechanics? And what are the steps along the development workflow?
And you can truncate that however you like.
I was gonna say, how long do you have?
Yeah, you're going to want to do this bite-sized version for now.
So
It's gonna
in
be more-
terms of starting with theming versus starting with mechanics, the answer there is yes. It varies. Sometimes,
Why don't you do this? Why don't you use gods? Why don't you use one of the gods bosses as an example?
okay.
Ooh, Skyva.
Well, he said operation. So does
Right.
it work exactly the same way for each boss, or does it if you decide to have six bosses?
That's why the A or B
See what I'm
answer
saying?
is yes.
Right.
In terms of the general operation, like we are going to do gods from the machine as the machine. They're the gods of Zakul personified because over time myth warped reality.
right,
and,
right.
and so that's usually decided at a high level, not with no input from anyone else, but usually it's those larger thematic story structures are at the top level planning of like where we kind of want to go with it.
Right.
And then you get into the individual encounters. We usually know the number of encounters that we want to make. Sometimes we know ahead of time exactly what we want the encounters to be. For instance, with gods from the machine, we have the Zakul and Pantheon. Those are what the bosses are going to be. And then in terms of how we're going to break them down, like the decision to group Ivella and Esne together and things like that. Sometimes the pieces on that just fall together on their own. Sometimes we are just like, what sorts of things thematically match this that we might want to do? And then for individual bosses,
so can I jump in just for a second?
Yeah.
So how do you decide how many? Let's.
Well, usually the right number, finger quotes, usually winds up being around 5, just in terms of length and pacing. S&V was an experiment when we went up to 7, and usually that operation seems to just run a little too long for people's tastes. So that was why we didn't go back to that.
There's also the never-ending element in game design of time and resources. Time, resources, and deliverable, right? Like, when's it need to be there? How many bosses can we get in that amount of time with the resources we have?
Yeah.
So 5 is the sweet spot I'm getting from you in general.
Usually seems to be, in terms of what we found, in terms of how long it winds up, how long it takes to make, how long it takes to play through, which the play experience is arguably, what you want driving that anyway. But yeah, that seems to be about where we found works best. Not guaranteeing that is the objective correct answer, but as we've discovered it.
So just from a purely mathematical standpoint, it seems to me like 6 would be a better idea because you've got 14 slots, 2 of which repeat, so then you could just put 2 on each boss and you'd be good.
You're talking about,
but that's a gear matter, not a boss design.
You're talking about if gear dropped from bosses.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Purely from a gear number statistic.
I could talk about that for a while, but we don't have that kind of time.
Okay, so let's go back. So we're designing a thing. So you guys come up with a plan.
Yep.
The theme, kind of your general idea, how many bosses. Then what?
Then some encounters.
Why don't you use Nahud as an example? At least from my side, that felt like that was an interesting example of like exploring mechanics.
Yeah, well,
and also tech.
Well, here, let me start with Abel and Destiny. Abel and Destiny is an example of us starting with an idea for mechanic. I had that encounter in my head since 3.0. We just didn't have, at the time of 3.0, we didn't have the granted ability technology nailed down to the point where it was stable and robust enough to use in an encounter. And that actually just missed that boat. And so as soon as I started just playing around with the tech when we were demoing it, I was like, I bet you could make this encounter out of this. And so that's been a back burner idea in my head for a while. And it was just sort of a happy coincidence that Ivel and Nesne work as a 2-part, an A and a B, a yin and a yang style encounter, where the positive and negative polarity, and you can make yourself immune to half the damage in the encounter at any given time. That encounter wound up in that way coming together as a concept pretty well and pretty immediately. Tithe is an example of an encounter that was driven from theme to mechanics, in terms of, okay, this is the god of rage. What types of things can we do to build an encounter that play with this concept or intuitively relate to it? And then the concept of, well, the boss just has this rage meter that ebbs and flows, and you need to not let it get too high. But you can't really avoid him getting any of it. And the fact that letting him friendly fire his own drones seems like the sort of out of control thing that you would associate with rage. But then him getting more mad because you made him do it also fits, thematically with the whole rage thing. And so that being the whole back and forth seesaw construct there wound up coming from theme. Nahut is sort of an intersection between the two. When you have this, this god of stealth assassination, I was like, okay, top level idea. What if the boss is invisible and can hit you when you can't see him? And then the first thing in my mind was like, okay, we've never made a raid encounter with the stealth tech before. Is that even going to work with the way what caveats and random edge cases in the stealth tech exist that we've never encountered because we've never tried to use it in this manner before? And what the UI, what happens in the UI when you get hit with an entity that your client doesn't know exists? Are any of these things going to explode horribly? And so in the process of working through building it, seeing what worked, seeing what wasn't workable, and seeing what we oughtn't to do, it helped shape the encounter into what it wound up being. That encounter took a lot of doing to build. It's kind of like special place in my heart the way that a problem child does. But in the end, that wound up being one of the most visually spectacular encounters I think we've ever made.
Is that why he's referred to as
just knocked it out of the park with all the trappings and things in his encounter, and the model himself and the voice that we got for him winds up being intimidating in exactly the right way, and so I wound up very happy with that. You know, who doesn't love just a black hole that's just getting bigger in the middle of the room the entire encounter? Kind of like, you're really not supposed to be in there when this machine is on. You know, and it's generally a bad thing.
Kind of like a trash compactor, you know?
So what I'm hearing a little bit here, when we're talking about the mechanics of each boss, I imagine there's some ideas that you come up with, which is during your planning parts, right? But then through iteration, you're encountering all of this. So,
yeah. And
is that further down? When does the iteration? I imagine it kind of happens throughout the process, but is there more an intensive part?
Yeah.
And when along like the outline would that fall?
Right. In terms of the process side of things, we usually start once we know approximately what, like, we're going to do Nahut, the hated son, the god of stealth and assassination. I'll schedule a brainstorm meeting with like a large subsection of the team, and we'll usually spend about an hour per boss just talking through like what types of things could this possibly do, where do we want to start with this, and that gets the designer past the blank page, which is the blank page is a horrible thing in design. It could take you 1 hour, it could take you a week, and so having anything to help you pass that hump of is just super useful for time efficiency, if nothing else. And so past that point, we start to build sort of the first theoretically functional version of the encounter. It's like you can pull the encounter, it's going to do some things, all the effects are horribly placeholder. Like for a time, all of Tyth's drones were the operations teams from Darvanis, just like the color-coded teams. And that's how you could tell what drone it was. They were all Mandalorians running around in armor, and Tyth was just a generic giant protocol droid.
Wow, you call
so
it generic. That might make me angry.
There's some cool stuff that happens in early testing of operations, where you're like, man, what the hell is this?
I like that. Oh, yeah, because that's right. Because even when we can talk about the beta test without
the placeholder the initial conversation you have with Tyth, the placeholder cinematic for that. I just put the character standing right in front of Tyth, just doing no bones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
At least 2 of us were here for the beta testing, so we saw that.
And so once we get it in that what we call first playable state, we will start.
Well, we're not live, so we can cut it out. You can just tell us.
They can say that there was a test and they participated in it. They can say exactly what I asked them, Eric Musco.
Just so you know, I'm currently on the PTS, but I was not into the closed stuff.
So there you go.
This is what every day is like, by the way.
I love my life. So
absolutely, there were people that participated.
Yes.
That are in this chat.
there, or at
What the
least there's a
solution is, right?
encounter. Initially, you fail, then you think you try, and you incrementally succeed more and more until you beat the encounter. And then it's like, you know, I have overcome this challenge, and it wasn't trivial, but it didn't necessarily frustrate me.
Uh-oh. We're losing sound, Redna.
Okay, I didn't know if it was just me.
Yeah, you faded out there for a second.
We did?
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
well.
the last few words. You were fine.
Okay.
Somehow Matt got choppy, but we could hear Eric.
So it's 4:11.
So a good quick follow-up for you then, because we've seen basically, just as gamers and participants, we've seen obviously 3 distinct operations designs given to us. Temple of Sacrifice, Ravagers, and then of course the most recent Gods from the Machine, where you had Temple of Sacrifice was the conclusion to the overarching story. You had Ravagers, which actually had phenomenal story that I bet most people don't have a clue about because they're not listening to the voices as they're talking to them.
I love that operation.
It's a great operation, and you know, like I would argue, it even has deeper story than Temple of Sacrifice does, aside from the fact that, you know, Temple of Sacrifice has a story leading up to it. And then you have Gods from the Machine, which came to us piecemeal, and if there's story, I'm unaware of it because all I care about is getting to the next boss.
There is.
That's actually something I was going to ask earlier. The way they refer to, what is it, Nahut, or how do you pronounce it? The Son of Shadows. The way Skyva talks about him, or whoever it is, that she's like, oh, it's like, don't do this, or leave them alone, or whatever. However it is she says, I was like, there's more to the story here. Why do they treat him like this? Why do they say these things? And everyone's like, let's just kill the boss. I'm like, wait, you're not even listening. I mean, I want to kill the boss, too.
Was
So I
there a
think
final part of that question, Redna?
Well, yeah, so of those 3 formats of operations design, build, and release, which would be your preference? Just a personal preference.
One thing I want to clarify before Matt answers, I actually think Gods from the Machine and Temple of Sacrifice would probably be the same, because Gods from the Machine is intended to be the tail end of what happens on Iocath, because the events of Iocath lead up to the Gods from the Machine being there. So they're very similar in that way, except one was obviously expansion.
Have you done the Iocath story, Redna?
I think maybe, I finally finished it recently.
Okay.
Anyway,
what a positive affirmative answer.
There it is. Yeah.
It was forgettable. So
we're asking him to do that for a while.
I got to be honest with you, Iocath was not my favorite either.
To be fair,
I get lost.
there is the way that there is a third separation though is that Gods from the Machine was released over time, so you wouldn't actually have gotten that full story at one time. So there's still 3 different. But I just
right, and actually,
out
I would expect that having designed each one independently and released them over such an extended period of time would actually impact you as an operations designer more than, at least in a significant manner.
Always having something that is in the process of shipping while you need to be working on something else behind it, and not sleeping because of PTS. Because PTS is so much fun, but man, but when PTS was up, my day was basically the Euros start at noon, NA starts at 5, the Pacificos start at 9, and then the Oceanics start at about 1 a.m.
Yep.
And you can't appear unfair, so if you're gonna be there for some of them, you have to try and be there for all of them, and then you're showing up for work at 2 p.m. and people are like, "You okay?"
Well, I would say just for your own sanity, you can ignore the Pacificos because that's the one PAX that BioWare's never gone to. So clearly they're already unimportant.
Wow. Okay, Redna. He was joking.
No, he's
no,
not.
I'm
He
just
doesn't
channeling
joke
our
often.
viewers' saltiness because they would love to have you guys there, and I know Musco would love to, but the whole international travel, Germany's more important than Australia. So.
We haven't gone to Germany actually in a couple years either. To be fair,
A couple of years, that's true.
Anyway,
okay.
do you want to
Any
what's
other?
your preference on which style of op is your preference to build?
I think it's best when everything reinforces the same narrative and the same character. So I think Temple of Sacrifice wound up being working like an operation is the kind of thing that works well as the capstone on an encounter, because usually narrative structure, you are building to something, you're building to a climactic event, and then the epic conflict at the end of the story where you confront whatever big antagonist.
Okay, so that makes
Yeah, I
sense.
guess
So you actually do have that vision in your mind, even though you're doing, you're the programmer for the mechanics and everything. That notion of the overarching story and its culmination is something that you do actually incorporate into the game design of the operations as you proceed to that final boss.
Even in Gods from the Machine, even though they were released over time, we always considered these to be bosses. Always considered them to be bosses in a progression. The hitch with Gods from the Machine is that because each of the bosses were coming out individually, they needed to be features that could stand on their own, which immediately upped the design complexity ante on all of them, which is why instead of what we got in the first past releases of all of the bosses, effectively Tithe was a boss 3, bosses 2, 4, and 5 were boss 5s, and then Isaac's was this mythical boss 6.
Let me explain the numbers he's rattling at you right now. He's talking about complexity. So something that would be like the first boss would tend to be quite a bit simpler.
Yes.
Not quite a tank and spank, but something with only 1 or 2 mechanics to get you introduced to the operation. And then as you progress through the operation, they get substantially harder. So the third boss is a gate boss, so it's difficult to get to the second half of the operation. And then the last boss is very difficult, the boss 5.
Yes.
So the higher the number, the higher the complexity.
So you usually get lockouts at the gate boss. Then it's when pug groups fall apart. That's the ones where they're like,
story
just
mode
kidding.
pug groups shouldn't fall apart too hard.
Okay,
Right?
I'll be coming in with a question since I am the drunken Friday Night Bowling League version of rating as opposed
that's
to
the best version of rating.
Thank you. My opinion is as
okay
well.
then.
I'm sorry,
agree
but
with your
everybody
request
wanted
assessment.
to do WOG. I'm just saying because just saying. So as a very average kind of basic person to operations, I'm just asking about so the last 2 operations, Gods of the Machine and Temple of Sacrifice, were kind of tuned up. Not in the normal nomenclature, but we'll just say they're kind of a step above, even at base level, than many of the operations that came before, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the first question I have, is this intentional? Is this what we're going to be seeing going forward?
That's 2 questions.
Okay.
The answer to the first question is yes, it is intentional. B, is it indicative of what we will see going forward? Less certain. Gods from the Machine was a little further ahead than TOS, and that's just because of the way that it was single bosses at a time, as we discussed.
Right.
And that's, I think I said this in a previous stream. I think that's a thing that's okay to do every now and again, is to have something that stands a little ahead difficulty-wise, but it's not something you can do all the time or should do all the time.
Correct.
Because it winds up being a little exclusive. So I would suspect that the next operation is probably going to be more classically in line with what we have done before that, but that's so far out that anything in design can change.
Correct. I understand. I just can say, just from my perspective, I've never finished TOS, and I've not made it past. I saw Nahut once.
In story mode or veteran mode?
Story. I'm not a veteran raider. I am totally story mode. So yes, I've never made it past Underlurker, and I've never made it past Nahut. And I was in beta testing, so
you should give that a go on PTS because story mode has also been tuned down in certain places. So if it's also not story mode viable with these changes, then we need that feedback. We can pull it back further, and we need to pull it back. That's actually
cool. Let's go do this.
All you needed to do was watch WOG, and I mean, pretty much we've all come to the realization that we weren't going to make it through. No, we weren't. I mean, we were.
Onto this?
All of us have been rating
we do.
doing this. It's 4 years.
Lots of streamers
I will watch.
Yeah.
Send me the VOD.
I stopped streaming WOG because I couldn't stop raging. I was like,
streaming
we're pulling trash!
Darth Pops was streaming it, Marshall and Will, because they're the heads of WOG.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
not
actually
so,
Friday Night Bowling League.
so for
question.
me, that's my concern, is our kind of average raiders going to get left behind, or people who have inconsistent raid groups. Many of us are kind of like ad hoc groups, and that Underlurker, oh my god,
leave ad hoc groups behind. It ought not to do so.
Is
so
that-
if it is,
is that meant to be
that's
the-
an issue that
for
we need to address.
Temple
I
of
would be
Sacrifice and
very
Ravagers as
interested
well?
to know.
What?
Did you have that intention for Temple of Sacrifice and Ravagers as well? Because I can assure you, most people that do story mode groups do not do either of those operations because they're hard mode at story mode.
I was iffy to do group finder this morning. Because I was like, who is going to be in there with me?
I had a question about data, whether or not you guys have any data to support what Redna just said, because that's been my experience as well. People
We have
don't
data.
hug.
Like I've even been in nightmare groups that don't do hard
know.
mode Ravagers and Temple.
I'm just asking if you wanted to give it, and that was your lead-in to give it or not give it. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So, you said that I overheard something you said, Matt, that that's your intention, and if it's not happening, you need feedback. Is that what you said? So
Yeah.
I didn't hear everything you said.
Especially now. Now that Gods from the Machine has a full difficulty spread, all of the difficulties should sit where they're supposed to. When there were only 2 of them, everything was pulled up a little higher on purpose, but that is no longer supposed to be the case. And if it is still the case, we need to know that, and we will, so we can address it. But that's kind of why don't just test master mode on PTS.
Okay.
Like, you can run through story and veteran, and it should go. And if it doesn't go, we need to know.
There's been multiple
slogan.
instances where my husband and I have been doing the operation. We get to Skyva, and he's tanking and I'm healing, and we're the only 2 left because we're the only 2 who can get through it. So that's why I want a clarification on that, because currently, as it's sitting live, not on PTS Live, almost all the groups I'm in don't make it to Isaac's, which is why I was asking.
Some of that is the time also. Gods from the Machine runs a little long in a pug.
I'm sorry.
And so some of the changes, like the veteran changes to Isaac's are trying to pull several minutes off the encounter duration. And there's also story mode changes meant to pull time off of the encounter duration. So I am trying to accelerate that a little bit. I don't like doing things like just globally nerfing trash HP because some of a lot of mechanics are timing, and when you make things die too fast, then all the mechanics fall apart because the pacing is wrong. And so those kind of sledgehammer approach things, I shy away from them. But if it needs to be done, there is a point where it's if the other side of the equation is, or people just don't engage with the content, the correct answer is to hit it with a sledgehammer so that people engage with the content, right? It is.
And we can tell you one of the things that's actually very challenging for us to get feedback on in general is when things are too hard. People don't like to admit they can't complete content as a general thing. So as a call to everyone, if you are running things like story mode ops are intended that you can fund. That is the intention.
Yes.
Right. Not saying they should be easy, but they should be puggable. And so if you're running into content where that you're hitting brick walls of this feels like it should be able to be completed and it's not, that is not a failure of yours. That is a failure of ours, and you need to let us know.
I would agree with that, just from someone who is an average kind of like story mode, and I'm really not inclined to challenge myself with anything further because that's fine with me.
Yeah.
There are just operations I won't do. In general, Temple Sacrifice is one. It took us, 6 runs at Ravagers and WOG to finally get to the end? I think it was a solid 6 times. Master Blaster got
And
us.
that's not even a pug. That's a group that's actually, they may not be
Correct.
good, but they do play together regularly.
And we have Nightmare.
And to be
Magic has
fair-
been there. Redna's been there. We've had Nightmare level people in there helping, and we still were getting wrecked.
That's what I was about to say. To be fair, there's about 3 of us that tend to carry a majority of the weight, and so when the others are like, "Oh, well, they're doing it," then they're kind of just pulling random crap all the time that we generally like to skip. So,
but there are
it's not
some of
always
us
the-
like me who are actually trying. I'm just not
Yes.
a raider, so and I'm whatever. Okay,
One
continue
question.
on.
There's a
We've got
lava
6
boss
minutes.
in
We have 6 minutes.
in Eternity Vault that actually killed our WOG group.
Garge.
Well, no, it's before Garge. It's that corner where you're supposed to turn, and if you don't turn, you fall over the edge into a lava pit. Yeah, wiped an entire raid group that way.
I wasn't in that one, to be
Because they
frank.
literally, one guy fell
wasn't
down,
in
and
that
then
one.
everybody else jumped in to help
That
him.
was years before you came in.
Yeah, I was
Right.
in with the
What happens when you get to the bridge in S&V? Heaven forbid, Nightmare mode S&V.
on
Yeah.
Nightmare mode.
No,
I
this
ride
is
the edge and I
they
walk
won't do
it,
hard
I-
mode, let alone Nightmare.
I'm going to be honest. I played with the idea at one point of unannouncedly randomizing the spawn of the SMV Nightmare Bridge.
We heard that.
That would have been
That
awesome.
would have been
I would have
great,
told you,
yeah.
but it would have been
Don't
awesome.
encourage him. Don't encourage him.
Well, you can do that to
Listen,
Nightmare
I
people.
heard-
I don't care because I won't ever do that content.
Right? Like, that's where you're
Have at it.
explicitly
Enjoy
signing
it.
up for that. That's
Exactly.
what I say.
Please
Exactly.
do it.
I would be
Do it.
fine with that. I mean, I would probably cry, but it'd be fine.
Okay,
I
we
have a
time
question.
for one more question. This is the last one. They have to stop.
I'll let you guys know because we can't stay past 4:30, 3:30 our time. But if you want to send questions that you have afterwards, we can work on getting some of those answers.
I'll
that's
write a bunch
awesome.
of that's fine.
That is awesome. That would be great.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
because we can cover that on Monday. So
Yep.
Why did you decide to release one boss at a time? Was it to appease people, or did you have a plan specifically in place when you decided to release Guys of the Machine one at a time?
Honestly, that was a matter of, okay, if we're going to build the whole operation, when is this going to come out?
Yeah, if you remember, I mean, you guys play ops, you'll remember. I mean, there was daily people putting us on notice of how many months it had been since we released an operation.
Oh,
right? Like, it's fair. It had been a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, they're not wrong, right? It's valid criticism, and so
And we actually talked about this very openly when we started releasing Gods, where we're like, we're going to try something different. Like, the option is we make you wait another 9 months,
Yep,
10
I
months
remember that.
to get a full operation, or we're going to give you very, like, more complicated and harder than usual ops bosses one at a time starting right now.
yeah. If we had built Gods from the Machine as one set of 5 bosses, it would not have taken as long to build as it took to build the individual boss versions, because the encounters themselves would have been like had the more coherent progression structure that the other operations do. So the earlier bosses would have been simpler. They all would not have been as big items as they were individually.
Were you satisfied with that outcome?
It's interesting now when you see it all put together. It's just like, wow, there's a lot here. There's a lot here. And that's going to be an interesting thing that we have to keep dealing with as the game moves on. What happens with this operation that is its own little special snowflake in terms of difficulty and complexity? I don't have an answer to that one yet. I'm still working on it.
okay,
Well,
I actually have
that's okay.
2
I'm
quick
a horrible
questions for you,
person,
real
so.
quick. Then
You've got
Sure.
2 minutes.
yes, I see. So, Gods from the Machine wasn't going to have a nightmare mode. Oh, now we get a nightmare mode.
Yes.
Ravtos was going to have a nightmare mode, and then it was announced, oh, we'll never do nightmare modes again. So, could we get a nightmare mode for those two?
Okay, I told Keith, I just told him to his face, I'm like, if we make a master mode for this, no one is ever going to believe us when we say we're not going to do it again.
Yeah.
And then the immediate follow-up question is, when are we getting Ravtos Nightmare? I just told him, this is what you're signing up for. This is what you're signing us and him up for.
And I picture, I wasn't there when this conversation happened, but I can see Keith laughing in my head as you're telling him this, where he's like, I know.
That's my plan.
That's, yeah.
Speaking of
So is
evil
he just a
plans,
giant troll then?
I have to thank the player base. The operations healing training dummy was my nefarious plot to get player data on exactly how much AoE healing you all can output.
Really?
Nice.
It worked.
Very nice.
It
So I
worked.
should probably go start using mine then.
That's great.
So
That's
I
pretty
used that in the
awesome.
tuning for
tell
Nightmare Gods in the Machine. So thanks.
I just
Sorry.
want to insert
I've
right
not
here
used
while
it
we're
yet.
recording that, like, when people say they get data on everything, they mean they get data on everything.
One way or another.
So,
So how many people did horrible person then? That's what I want to know. No, I'm just kidding. Don't answer that. Don't
No,
answer.
I mean, and that's where I made this joke before we were recording, right? Where people are like, oh, Bioware should do X because it will lead to Y result. And to your question about, like, that you asked off interview of, like, what we do with that feedback, there's a lot of times players are very off the mark because
Right.
they don't have access to all the data we do.
Right.
But a lot of times your instincts are right on the mark, right on the money, and so we run with those.
Which, by
And
the
I
way,
would-
the feedback, the response to the feedback in the forums for the beta testing and all of that, off the hook. Like, you guys have been rocking it on that. My only final question would be, is there anything, literally anything, Mr. Musco, that you can approve to share with us concerning anything we haven't heard about quote-unquote next operation or expansion or
Exclusive
anything like that?
information.
Just anything
man.
new
Asking
and
for.
fun to pop out there.
Redden's been doing this too long because he knows to put the pressure on me instead of you. Okay, so I got one for you. I almost said this earlier. So Matt was talking about that we do testing. We do like internal testing of things and stuff for the future. I have personally played a group encounter. So I'll only say that none of you know about. So that should give you an idea of that. It's not. There is at least a group encounter, not as far away as you think.
Okay, cool.
Oh. Well,
I will also say,
Can you confirm that that's PvE?
Yes.
Not PvP.
Keith is great, and he's always happy, he's always smiling, he's always, kind of soft-spoken, easygoing. If you want to get him to start spouting profanity, put him in a test, put him on a healer, and have ads that are not being picked up,
my God.
and you will just start hearing a stream.
It's great. He gets so passive-aggressive, of just like, who's our tanks again? There's ads on me.
Yes.
Do we have tanks?
How many tanks do we have? Because I only see one guard on the
like,
healer.
do we have a tank? Like, I think we have DPS with taunt.
That's funny. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking this time to chat with us.
Of course. And like I said, please send any follow-ups you have to Matt. Send them to me of the questions you sent me before. Let me try to get answers to, and I'll work with Matt to get you answers.
Okay. You don't trust him enough for us to send them to him? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I absolutely do not trust Matt enough for you to send them directly to him.
We trust you, Matt. We trust you.
I might say zany off-the-wall things.
Well, we trust you. You can email us anytime.
And I can say, that brings us to the end of the show. Gavel sound. You can get us at thecouncilofSWTOR.com pretty much anywhere. Google, Twitter, whatever. That's where. Patreons. The Council of SWTOR. Yeah, and, I know is the quote of the week. I know. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.